What's up, Jets fans, and welcome to episode 13 of JetNation Live. We are your hosts, Dylan Tereman and Glenn Naughton. Coming off a gigantic win, albeit against a backup in a weird circumstance for the Chicago Bears, the Jets pulled off a victory in the downpour at MetLife Stadium, 31-10. Glenn, I know it's not a win that people can glorify because it was against a lesser defense in a situation with a backup quarterback, but how are we doing coming off one of the Jets' biggest wins of the season?
Well, listen, it's a big win in the sense that the Jets did exactly what we thought they would do. I think I said 27-10. I think that was the final I predicted.
Yep.
And I think I saw a few people in that ball. Like everybody viewed this as like a couple score game, and it turned out to be that. There was some concerns I think when Chicago went down the field and scored right away, because that was kind of you thought, well, they'll be lucky to score a touchdown. So when they scored one early, but I think I even messaged you. I said they're going to settle down and win this game. Like I'm
You
not.
did.
There was some people like, oh, what's happening? There is that thought creeps in, like you're letting a bad team hang around, and when you let them hang around, that's how you choke. But I felt like they would win that game. Most important thing, obviously, was Mike White. Great performance. You know, quick, decisive. Ball came out. Ball was on target, and he looked way better than anyone. Well, not anyone, but way better than a lot of people thought he would.
Yeah, exactly. Mike White, a battle of backup quarterbacks, essentially. It's kind of insane. You look at the schedule when it first comes out and you see Justin Fields, Zach Wilson down the stretch, and then Zach Wilson versus Trevor Lawrence down the stretch for what could be a meaningful game if all goes right. And that's not the case. That's not what we got at all. We got Trevor Siemian versus Mike White. And like we talked about last week, we weren't exactly sure what we were going to get from Mike White, but we could anticipate a baseline of a couple touchdowns and at least 200 something yards. I projected in the range of 230. And quite frankly, he blew that out. He got that at halftime. He went crazy. He started out on the first drive, 6 of 7 for 69 yards and a touchdown. Ended the first half, 16 of 20, 235 and 2 touchdowns. And the touchdowns were really nice. Obviously, they were both the Garrett Wilson touchdowns in the first half. Obviously, the injury happened on the second one, but he ended the day with 315 yards, 3 touchdowns. So exactly the opposite of what we had seen from the quarterback position so far. I noticed a lot of play action specifically in his in the game plan, 40% or roughly of his dropbacks were with play action, which I thought was a big difference from Zach Wilson. I feel like Zach Wilson was doing the RPO things, but not so much play action. So the pure play action game under center from Mike White was different. The layered throws, I think, was my first big point out of the ball game. He had a couple risky ones. There was the interception or almost interception on the first play when the Jets were down down 10-7 to Garrett Wilson. He threw the pass that was almost intercepted. And I was a little nervous because that's Mike White's game. He's going to throw the riskier passes, but
He's going to. Yep.
Exactly. But like you said offline or just before we went online, you have to have a quarterback that isn't afraid to throw interceptions. So it seemed like he settled down after that, ended with 315. He did say in his post game, and then I'll throw it to you with this question. He did say in his post game that he was listening to the fans chanting Mike White at certain moments of the game. And then he did put the caveat of when they were on offense, he would like them to not do it. So first and foremost, I do want to tell anybody going to MetLife, if they are going to cheer, just do it when the Jets are on defense, because it's very hard when the Jets, when they're trying to establish a drive, you got to, hear the play count. Everybody's got to be in sync. So you got to be quiet on offense and let Mike White cook. So I just want to throw it to you from Mike White exclusively before we get into anything else in this game, because there was a ton of positives. Mike White alone, what was your thoughts and just basically, do you think this is sustainable for him?
I don't see why not. You look at even when he played poorly. Now, do I think 0 interceptions every week? No, that's not sustainable.
Right.
He's going to throw picks. I'm pretty sure I talked about it in the post game, but I know it was a topic of conversation on the forums on JetNation.com, and I started a thread in there, and other people had commented, basically saying that this defense is good enough that you can afford a couple of picks as long as you're scoring touchdowns. And look, it's not the greatest show on turf, but former Rams head coach Mike Martz, I remember when the Rams had that offense, he almost didn't care about turnovers. He was like, we're scoring 5, 6 touchdowns either way. If we throw 3 or 4 picks, that's fine too, because we're going to score 35, 45.
Hmm.
Now, the Jets aren't quite at that level with Mike White, but I think they're at a point in time with Mike White where they're like, if he's going to throw a couple touchdowns and we're going to run 1 or 2 in, we can live with a couple of picks, and you can with with the way this defense plays. So I think it's sustainable. I think it's far more sustainable than what was happening with Zach Wilson, which is winning games with no touchdowns and 150 yards passing. That's not gonna sustain itself. Finding the end zone 3 or 4 times with a couple of picks with this defense, it's sustainable. It's a matter of, can he do it against a more quality opponent? And we're going to find that in the coming weeks. Listen, the Jets got lucky in the sense that this Bear secondary was banged up. Let's not lie to ourselves about it. But at the
Right.
same time, some of those throws from Mike White, they were, I think the first or second throw, the one to Garrett Wilson, that was a tight window. Like, it doesn't get any tighter, and he zipped it right in there. So it's not as if all these plays that the Jets, were receivers were running in the clear with no DBs to worry about. Some of these throws had to be on target, and they were. He had the beautiful throw to Elijah Moore on the 42-yard gain over the middle. He made some really nice throws in this game, and that, I get when people talk about the quality of opponent, but I don't think that doesn't hold a lot of water with me if the throw is put in a spot where there is still a defender there to make a play, but you're completing the pass. There's just still, it's Patrick Peterson, the old days, Deion Sanders. They're not the only guys in the league who can bat a pass away. Just
Right.
because the defender isn't elite doesn't mean he's not a threat to the ball if he's standing, within arm's length of the receiver. And we saw a lot of that with Mike White against the Bears, and we saw them making these plays. So it was fun to watch. It was fun to watch so many guys get involved. And as someone just commented to us, the receivers were on high alert, knowing anyone could get the ball. That I made that point. I think I can't remember if I did that in the post game write up or the video or whatever. But I said to somebody, I said, when you have 10 guys get a catch, everyone on offense is thinking, this could be my ball. This could be me right here.
Yep.
So these guys are human beings, right? Like, you want to believe in your heart of hearts that every single guy is going to give 100% on every snap. You want to believe that. But when you're a guy like Elijah Moore, and I dogged him as much as anyone, but if you're going to run 30 routes a week and not see a target, at some point those routes are going to get a little bit lazier, a little bit. Maybe I'm not going to be as sharp on this one because it doesn't matter because they don't even look my way.
For
Well,
sure.
now even if it's only a couple balls, you're getting a couple balls a game. You don't know when they're coming. Everyone's going to be on their toes, and that everybody gets involved. And I think that's why we saw the players rally around Mike White, because he's a popular guy in that locker room. And for years, how many times have I watched the game where an opposing quarterback, they throw up a graphic 3 drives into the game, has completed 14 balls to 12 different receivers, and then the Jets just, you're lucky if 4 guys get a catch.
Right. Yeah, and to that point, Mike White did complete passes to 10 different receivers on Sunday. You mentioned it. Elijah Moore got involved in the ball game, 2 catches for 64 yards and the touchdown. Obviously, the beautiful 42-yard pass, and then the yards after catch, which is kind of his calling card. We've seen this before with Joe Flacco on the slant pass. I believe it was against the
Miami.
Dolphins. Yes,
Yep.
exactly. So we've seen that before. And then the touchdown pass, Mike White said he loved that Elijah Moore was able to feel the soft spot on the outbreaking route and just get open. And that was something that Joe Flacco also mentioned about Elijah Moore. And that's the coaches kind of reiterate the same thing. He's that old dog mentality, that old soul that Rob Saleh keeps calling him. Like, he's a veteran in a sense with his route running. He knows what to do with the ball in space, to get the ball. So Mike White was able to find him. Garrett Wilson, 5 catches, 95 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He brings back the Pepsi Zero Sugar Rookie of the Week for the 8th time. It comes back to Florham Park. It might as well just stay there at this point. So Mike White, yeah, you mentioned a couple of his passes. The first one to Garrett Wilson in the tight window on the slant route. The first Garrett Wilson touchdown, I know there was holding at the top of the route by Kindle Vildor, but the route running by Garrett Wilson to fake inside, then go out, wide open for the touchdown. Then I wanted to mention another big play, and this was the one that set up the second Garrett Wilson touchdown. The play before that, it was a 3rd and 2, and it was a check down to Ty Johnson. They motioned Braxton Berrios out of the backfield, which is something they did quite a bit in this game, which I thought was a nice new wrinkle for their personnel, especially with Michael Carter out. Braxton Berrios coming out of the backfield, motioning to the right. That was his man indicator. He had a nice sell on the play action. He got 2 inside linebackers to bite. Ty Johnson just kind of snuck out in the flat, but Mike White at the top of his drop, Nate Herbig got beat on an interior pressure, and Mike White was able to just kind of dip his shoulder with the ball and step up a half step into the pocket where another defender was crashing down on him. He took the hit, which is something we said Zach has not been willing to do, or at least putting on tape that he's willing to do in the past month. So he stepped up into the hit, delivered it directly to where Ty Johnson needed to on his outside shoulder. He cut up the field for 16 yards. Next play was the Garrett Wilson touchdown. So Mike White, he was doing all the easy things like Rob Saleh said, but I also think he was doing the hard things that Zach Wilson couldn't, wouldn't, shouldn't, whatever isn't doing. And I feel like that was fully on display, all the reasons why Mike White deserves this job, and he's clearly earned it. I know Rob Saleh mentioned that he, in the Giants preseason game, that's when things started to click for him. He had a very slow training camp, Rob Saleh said, but the Giants preseason game, he started coming on. That's when his confidence came back. So, excuse me, for Mike White to grind from QB3 to the backup spot. I know it didn't really, take the backup spot as much as they, I guess he did take it from Joe Flacco, and now he was given the QB1 spot because Zach Wilson struggles, and I don't think he's going to relinquish these QB1 opportunities. I know we mentioned it last week. This could be the end of Zach for the season if the playoff stretch goes. So how do you feel about that? Is Zach Wilson kind of on the edge of losing his job before we get into another couple battles that might be on the line?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't see how anyone can see it any other way, unless Mike White just has sort of epic collapse and has a couple of back-to-back 3 or 4 interception games without putting points on the board. But as long as the offense is moving the chains, and, I said this before we came on the air, I said it last week on the show, I don't see how anyone can look at the way Zach Wilson was playing and think that he's a better option than Mike White in any way, shape, or form.
Yep.
And as I tweeted out during the game, and then Robert Saleh said, I think I tweeted out after, it was only after a couple drives, but I said the 2 biggest things jumping out at me right now are the quickness with which the ball is coming out, which I'd said pregame. That was the one thing I was hoping to see was read the defense and get the ball out.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing was that Mike White was hitting the swings and the screens and the short stuff. And Robert Saleh said after the game, he makes easy stuff look easy. And that to me was, that's a pretty big swipe at Zach Wilson, whether people want to admit it or realize it. Like you just said, basically, thank God I got a guy who can hit a screen pass because I didn't have that before. So I think that Mike White, as long as he keeps taking what the defense gives him, these are all cliches, but I always say cliches exist for a reason, right? There's a lot of truth behind them. Everyone says that. Yeah, because it's true. So as long as he keeps taking what the defense gives him, and this defense is playing at a high level, then I think, I don't see any benefit to putting Zach Wilson back on the field. I think I said this last week because it was kind of reiterated today. Dan Orlovsky was on the Michael Kay show. And they went back to the point they were making, which was the season is going on now. Like, when do people think Zach Wilson is going to get his footwork coached up? Like, you're preparing for the next team. You can't, fine. He can work with flight school after practice for a little bit. Great. But the emphasis from the coaches is going to be on winning this week's game. And that's going to be the case every week. And I can't see a miraculous turnaround from Zach. And you said it. I said it last week. When I said that, I think my biggest concern with Zach is that he looks scared. He, bailing. I don't know if it was the throw you were talking about, but the first time last Sunday when I saw Mike White step up and complete a pass, I didn't even say anything. I just looked at it and went, there it is. That we haven't had that all year.
Yep.
Take the pass. Let the tackles clear the outsides for you. And if there's somebody coming up the middle, keep your eyes down the field, step up and deliver and take the hit. And Zach Wilson, up to this point, for whatever reason, hasn't been willing to do that. And you cannot be a successful NFL quarterback if your game plan is I'm going to go out there and not let anyone hit me today, you're going to have to get hit. And
Yep.
so I think Zach Wilson is definitely done for this year, barring injury to the other guys ahead of him.
Hmm.
Now look, if the Jets get knocked out of the playoff hunt and it's the final week of the season, maybe you roll them out there for one game. But as long as they're in this thing and the other quarterbacks are healthy, I think he's done. And then you see what the offseason brings.
Yeah, and for anybody confused, when Glenn referenced flight school for Zach Wilson, I believe it was Sala who mentioned it a couple weeks back. It's basically the third string and the practice squad players who don't get a ton of reps at practice because obviously they're dominated by the starters and second string. It's just them getting a 7-on-7 pass camp off to the side during after practice, during practice. So Zach Wilson working with them. I think it was Dan Leberfeld put out a video of him working with Rob Calabrese doing a footwork drill, and everybody was filling the comments with all their narratives and whatnot. And I think you're spot on right there. That Zach Wilson's job is probably no longer, at least for this season. Mike White has no reason to give it back. Obviously, he could completely implode, but I don't foresee that happening. I think compared to last year, even when he was struggling, this year he just looked a total, like a completely different player. Obviously, another year in the system helps. So I mentioned it earlier with the layered throws. I feel like he was just getting that out on the bootlegs and just throwing the passes as soon as they needed to be thrown. It wasn't let me wait an extra second and try to create or see if I can throw it downfield into like a double coverage that I think I can fit it into. So he really wasn't doing anything fancy. And I think that that's the reason why Mike F and White became Mike Efficiency White, according to the Jets Twitter. And that's exactly what it was. I believe it was 22 of 28 for 315. So he just absolutely balled. And I don't think there's a reason for him to have any stresses of the rear view mirror of Zach Wilson impressing anybody with his footwork in practice to take his job back as quarterback one, because as long as we keep winning games or are competitive in these ball games, even if they lose, Mike White has no reason to give up the spot. So another job who's potentially on the line, and that is the running back, the guy right behind Mike White. James Robinson did not dress for the game.
Right.
I am under the personal belief that it is his knee. He was not a healthy scratch. I know that's what the media said, he was a healthy scratch, but I believe his knee has been bothering him since he arrived, since he was playing. He came back from that Achilles injury way too soon. Not saying he rushed back and shouldn't be playing, but if he was medically cleared, he was barely medically cleared to return to football practice and playing speed. So he had to get his knee drained a couple weeks ago to even play in the game, and he wasn't very effective against the Patriots. So I understand why they chose to sit him, but I wouldn't say it's a healthy scratch. I think it's his knee. Anyway, Zonovan Knight, the UDFA from NC State, did come up and make a big day. Obviously, Michael Carter's injury helps with that, and he became the bell cow in the second half. But he ended the day, I had it right here, 14 carries, 69 yards, and he added 3 catches for 34 yards in the pass game. So a total of 103 yards, I believe, is the most for a rookie from scrimmage. So he just absolutely lit it up. Ty Johnson even lit it up, 5 for 62 and a touchdown. Michael Carter, before injury, had 6 for 21. And my first note when I was watching the game, I just wrote the New York Niners. As a couple years back, the 49ers became that team, and especially from a fantasy perspective, that you just couldn't trust any running back. And any given week was going to be that person's day to produce. They had Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert. Now these guys are in Miami, but it was always a trio or even a foursome of guys. Elijah Mitchell was in there too. So guys that you never knew who was going to get the ball. And I feel like that's kind of where the Jets are, especially with the Breece Hall injury, now that they're just kind of throwing these guys at the wall and seeing what sticks. And Zonovan Knight worked. However, James Robinson was a little peeved about not playing. He said he was, quote, upset, and he said he did not come here to not play. Salah said it's not the end of him by any means. He also said that about Zach, for what it's worth. So your reaction to hearing that, especially coming off another win, having another disgruntled player.
Well, listen, I have to disagree with you, Dylan. Even though I said it during the game and then I said it again after the game, those comments from me tell me it's not his knee. Because I mean, if he was hurt,
That's
I
true.
think they'd kind of be in agreement and like a wink, like, hey man, we're gonna say it's a healthy scratch, but we're gonna rest his knee a little longer.
That's a good point.
I don't think you then come out and go, this is bull. I should be playing. Like, dude, what are you doing? We said he hurts. Come on. So I agreed with you up until I heard that quote, and then I was like,
Right.
oh, maybe it's not. Maybe it's not a healthy scratch, or maybe it is a healthy scratch.
Hmm.
So the one thing about him that the interesting comment from Robert Saleh after the game saying he's leaving meat, he's left some meat on the bone. It's interesting because if you see when I tweeted out after the trade, I went and I watched a couple of his games, and while he looked decisive when he sort of made his decision, he didn't hesitate. But he was, I did notice it was a lot of cutback, a lot of juking, a lot of sort
Hmm.
of. It wasn't the take the ball, hit the hole. There was some more of an elusive back, busy feet in the backfield, which doesn't work with every scheme. So I watched a couple of games. I saw it work well with Jacksonville, and I sent out. I think it was a short touchdown run where again he showed good feet. He got to the outside, he hit the hole quickly. But I thought to myself as I was typing that, I'm like, oh, is that the kind of back this offense needs though? But I understood you're limited. You don't have like 50 backs to choose from at that time of year.
Hmm.
So I understood the move in getting him, but I did question in the back of my mind, like, not saying, excuse me, not saying I didn't think he would fit, but I did wonder, like, is he going to be a fit here? And he looked all right. The a few weeks ago when he did play and he played well, he did look decisive up the middle. There wasn't a lot of
Right. Yep.
dancing around the backfield, but maybe there may have been some other runs where the Jets felt like he could have gotten more. And listen, you never want a guy to say, "Yeah, I'm glad I'm not playing. I'm glad I sat this week." You want
Hmm.
everyone to be mad. You want everyone, there's a way to there's like mad you're not playing, and then there's you know the Elijah Moore thing, like demanding a trade. That's like a whole nother level.
Hmm.
So I'm not mad at the guy. You want him to want to play, but I think Bam Knight, who's another guy, I thought he was going to be a day 3 draft pick. I didn't think he would go undrafted. I think his ability to return kicks is what, in my mind, I looked at him and thought
Yes.
he's a good back. He can block. He can catch the ball to the backfield. And as a returner, I think that gets him drafted on day 3. He didn't get drafted, but I had tweeted out, like, this is a guy, if the Jets are looking to add a back, maybe they should get this guy on day 3. And I think that the catch I showed in the tweet was, a ball over the middle was thrown behind him. He kind of made this spinning catch and held on and went upfield and got a big gain. So he's a guy who moves well. He's not super speedy, but he's a guy who can do a little bit of everything. I mean, he runs hard. I don't know if you caught the one of the runs he had on Sunday where he got spun around by the defense, and then you could see him kind of
Yeah.
throw himself backward into the
Yep.
defense. Like even though he was wrapped up, he's like, if I can, launch myself backward and get another yard or two, I'm going to do it.
Exactly. Yep.
And that's one of those runs you look at a guy and go, oh, okay, that's his. Like he's no, you know, he's not a joke. Like this guy, he means it when he, running with authority and all that. So really like the way he played. Like I said, liked him as a draft prospect. I thought he was a round 6 or 7 guy. Glad they held on to him, and it could be. And I even as someone who said the Jets should draft him, I thought, well, I'm going to take the Jets' word on this. And if they're trading for somebody, that tells me they don't think Bam Knight's there yet.
Right.
But now you watch him play, and it's like, oh, he's there. Like, and
Where's he
there are people
been?
saying,
Why?
why did you
Yeah.
make this trade? Which I kind of get, even though I was someone saying, yes, make a trade. Bam's not ready if they're not playing him yet. But it looks like he might be. And look, worst case scenario, you have 4 really good backs going into next year.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think, yeah, you said it right there. I'll piggyback off that. Going into next year, I think he's somebody that is certainly deserving of a look. I know it's a small sample size of just one game, but when you look at the running backs that we have going into next year, I don't believe Ty Johnson is under contract. Obviously, you have Michael Carter, Brees Hall, Ty Johnson, and then James Robinson probably going to go, if not one, if not two. So Donovan Knight's probably going to be your running back 3 next year at the worst. And I think even though, yeah, it's a small sample size, but you said it, he was willing to take on contact. He was aggressively running in the fourth quarter, even when the Bears defense was tired. He wasn't. He was just going. And I heard somebody say that he was also playing special teams reps and just running on kickoffs. So even though he was the starting running back in the second half, to be on special teams and then to come out and play offense as well, like that says a lot. So he
Totally.
obviously took full advantage of his opportunity. I don't think that, like Mike White, he should have to give it up anytime soon. Now, I'm not saying James Robinson should be a healthy scratch every week. I think they have to find a way to make this 4-headed monster work. Obviously, you can't carry 4 running backs, 3 tight ends, and however many wide receivers into the game. So maybe they even trim down with more wide receivers. I don't know. And we talked about it in the beginning of the year. They were winning with the run game and the defense. So who's to say Jeff Smith and Denzel Mims aren't healthy scratches and they suit up 4 running backs?
Right.
I'm not saying that that's exactly what they're going to do, but any given week when they want to run the football, I think that could be an absolute option for them. And I think Mike LaFleur, I mentioned it with the personnel, wrinkles he did this week. That's certainly something he could take advantage of because all 4 of them prove that they can be pass game efficient as well. So the running backs as a whole, I mean, Ty Johnson's angry touchdown run, that was something else. I hope he wins that award from Good Morning Football. Kyle Brandt gives out the Angry Runs Award. I hope Ty Johnson's at least a nominee for that one because he put a good stiff arm on after breaking 2 tackles at the line of scrimmage for that 32-yard touchdown run. Saleh did say, however, you mentioned it with him, Zonovan versus James Robinson. Bam has NFL runs north and south. James needs to get more north and south. Not everything will be a home run. Get vertical and explode through the line of scrimmage. So I hear that, and I think that is exactly what James Robinson was doing on film. He was not hitting the hole with explosiveness. He was getting a little happy in the backfield, taking it outside, but then also cutting it back when he shouldn't cut it back, and he could have still taken it outside. So I'm glad that Zonovan Knight not only came in, but was decisive and used his vision to actually just hit the holes instead of, trying to be patient with it. I think Le'Veon Bell, obviously he's, his calling card is his patience. And it's kind of hard to do that style of running in our running system with the outside zone and everything that they like to do. It's all very timing based, hit the hole. And if it's not there, just cut up field. So
right.
James Robinson might not be done for the year, obviously, but Zonovan Knight should certainly get way more opportunities moving forward.
Absolutely.
Let's move over to
he probably will this week with Michael Carter.
Yeah, and Michael Carter's injury obviously is only going to help with that. It's a low ankle sprain for Michael Carter. I guess we could just run right into the injury report. He was a no practice Wednesday and Thursday this week, Michael Carter, with that low ankle sprain. Safety Ashton Davis has been out the past 2 days with his hamstring. Cedric Ogbuehi out with his groin injury that he suffered in the game where Max Mitchell came in. Chaz Surratt is also out with his hamstring the past 2 days. And I believe DJ Reed had a personal matter, but he's back at practice. And Sheldon Rankins and Kenny Yeboah are both back at practice. So it looks like Rankins is on pace to play, if not this week, next week against Buffalo. His absence has kind of been, very much missed. I feel like the replacements that they have in Solomon Thomas and Tanzel Smart, we can transition to the defense right there. They have not been anything that Sheldon Rankins has been. What were your overall thoughts of the defense? I know the defensive line didn't have the game of their season this year after 3 really high sack performances.
Listen, I mean, they did what you would expect them to do against Trevor Siemian. He's not a guy who poses a real threat.
Yep.
So, as I said before the game, I'd be surprised if the Bears scored a touchdown on again, I said 27-10, but I really felt like they could almost pitch a shutout in this one. And,
garbage time.
Obviously they dominated, which you would expect them to do. The sack Bryce Huff had was fantastic. I saw the get off on that was just unbelievable. I think, I've said it before. We both said it. He's a guy they need to get re-signed. I would give him a deal now. But we'll see what happens with that. But the defense did a nice job. The Bears don't have a ton of weapons. And they were down to their, second string, damn near down to their third string quarterback when they said that it looked like that was going to be the case with Siemian hurting an oblique during the pregame warmups. Obviously he goes, and you give them credit for doing what they should have done. You didn't play a great team. And, we said that if Justin Fields didn't play, the Bears might not score. And Justin Fields didn't play, and the Bears didn't score a whole lot. So good job by them. And, a much bigger challenge this week coming up against the Vikings.
Yeah, and then that touchdown, going back to it, when the Bears took the lead 10-7, I believe that was the first touchdown that DJ Reed has allowed in man coverage in over a year and a half. So It's some bonkers stat that I saw on Twitter from him in man coverage. So it was very rare, and he played the play perfectly on the touchdown. Byron Pringle just
Oh, that was crazy.
he just made a better play.
It was
Like
crazy. Yeah,
I
it was.
watched the
You can't
broadcast.
knock it. You can't. Yeah,
Exactly. I watched the broadcast over about 3 times, and I was like, how did he not break that up at a
that's exactly.
minimum?
I think
So
that's exactly what I said. I think I tweeted it. I was like, "How does he not get
yeah,
that ball out of there?" It was
yeah,
just an.
exactly. So my one big concern was the tackling again on defense. I don't want to lead with a negative, but the tackling was very poor. It was Brandon Eccles on the shallow under route that led to an explosive play. And then it was CJ Mosley. He didn't really miss the tackle, but just him slow in coverage 2 plays or
He
three
got
plays
smoked.
later.
He got smoked.
It didn't look great. And I'm not, I sat up here and I put Mosley as my MVP of the team 2-3 weeks ago when we did our midseason awards. So I'm not, backing off of that. But that play, if you wanted to use that against him, I fully understand. But he made up for it with an interception later on in the game. I don't have the sack numbers, but I do have the fourth down numbers. They held the Bears 4 for 13, so that's 30.7%. So that's near elite level, stopping on third down. Obviously, I understand it's Trevor Siemian, but to a degree, Trevor Siemian is going to efficiently run the playbook similarly to Mike White and, just drop back, get the ball out, know exactly where he's supposed to do. And obviously, Claypool got the better of Sauce on a couple of plays, but the Jets defense is far superior to the Bears offense. So it was just a matter of time when we were just going to stop them. Like you said, you tweeted it at me right after they scored. They're like, man, the Jets are going to settle down. I'm not worried. We're going to win this. And they ended up winning big. So Sauce gave up a couple to Claypool, then kind of locked it down again. Quincy Williams had a big tackle for loss that was set up by Jordan Whitehead that I really wanted to highlight because I feel like the tandem of Jordan Whitehead and Quincy Williams in the run game has been very, very dominant. And if they can usually it's Jordan Whitehead just coming down and clearing out an offensive lineman and then Quincy scraping right behind and just getting the tackle. So I like that. We talked about DJ Reed having the near interception. And then another thing I wanted to point out on film that I saw, the Jets ran a handful, maybe 5 reps of 5-man front. And that's very different. They don't normally do this. Their motto has always been front 4. Let's get home with 4.
Right.
But they kind of crept down Quan Alexander to the end man of the line of scrimmage standing up. And he rushed sometimes. Sometimes he would just stay back and kind of like contain a little bit. But they used him on the first play of the second half, and it resulted in a sack for, I believe it was JFM and Nathan Shepard. So just a couple of wrinkles that I saw the Jets doing that gave me hope from a defensive perspective that they can change when they need to. And I feel like when the Bears were running like they were, Saleh, he gave his props to David Montgomery. So they had a hard time against the run at first, it felt like. So what were your overall thoughts of the defense? I know it wasn't, the most clean game from them, but they kind of settled down halfway through and basically got back on track to what they were doing.
That was the main thing, and those were the plays that I mentioned in the recap. The Eccles not holding on that tackle was big.
Mm-hmm.
Mosley getting beat was big. Really, just a lot of what you just said. I think those are the exact plays that I covered that were a little bit worrisome early on. But you kind of, I just thought, there's no way this is going to continue. There's no way you're going to keep playing this way. It's just too much talent on this defense for that to happen. Would have. I thought we'd see a little bit more in the sack department just because of the fact that it's Trevor Siemian. You have lockdown corners, and the Bears are thin at receiver. I really thought we'd see another sort of 5 or 6 sack performance. That didn't happen. But we did see some pressures. They did pick up a couple of sacks, and it's just nice to see a Jets defense finally. And it's weird, isn't it? I mean, how many years of spending all these premium picks on D linemen, and they could never get it right. And now, Bryce Huff is probably better than every D lineman they drafted. And he's undrafted free agent, and he's better than Quentin Coples. And when all is said and done, he'll have been better than Muhammad Wilkerson. Sheldon Richardson was insanely talented, and he hung around for a while, but there was some issues with commitment with him, I think, and attitude. But all these, and look, they paid a ton of money for Carl Lawson. Obviously, Quentin Williams is a premium pick. But other than that, it's Nathan Shepard and a free agent and Sheldon Rankins, and not a lot of it's not 5 or 6 first rounders. It's some free agents who were earlier picks with other teams. But they've done a really nice job, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how the Jets approach the offseason, because I think Like I don't see Nathan Shepard coming back. Um, and Rankins isn't signed long term,
Mhm.
and so we could see some new bodies in there. But the group they have right now is doing a really nice job.
Yeah, I think it's always going to be a position that even outside the first round, they're always going to look at, and potentially even in the first round. And they're getting it done without first round talent.
Hmm.
JFM obviously being the waiver claim from Los Angeles. So that's so many guys that they've basically gotten for free with JFM, Bryce Huff, and yeah, Bryce Huff. When it's all said and done, he's going to be one of the best pass rushers for the
It's
Jets
just
ever.
it's crazy how it hasn't translated into sacks though. Every
Right.
year we see these, next gen stat metrics saying he's got the quickest get off in the NFL.
Mhm.
He's got like 2 sacks. It's like, when is it going to start to translate? So maybe we're seeing that now. He's got a couple in the last few weeks. But he played 9 snaps last week, so
Ye-
he's,
I thought
you
that
know,
was very fishy. He
he
had
really he literally is like the designated pass rusher. Like when there is a spot where we must have a sack or a pressure, we're putting you in there. But it almost feels like if there's any threat of a run, we're not playing you. They
yeah.
must not they must not think he can do anything at all against the run. And maybe that feels like it's got to be 3rd and 17 for us to put you in there, or it's got to be 3rd and long late in the game where we have a double-digit lead and we know they're throwing it.
Right, exactly, and they have to have it situation, and I'm okay if that's, like, what they wanna do,
If it
but
works,
I exactly, it's working. I think 9 snaps down from, like, 15, 16, 13 snaps the past few weeks is a bit much. I wanna see him out there a little more, especially if he is gonna be this productive, and that sack alone, I mean, the right tackle had 0 chance. He could barely even get his hands on him. I believe it was the fastest sack of a Jet this season.
I think so.
Um,
Yeah.
but another, yeah, I don't want to keep harping on negatives because they did play a really great game. But another thing that point stuck out to me, Quan Alexander had the forced fumble on Cole Kmet, and the Jets could not recover it. And I went back and I'm just thinking of all the forced fumbles and all the fumbles that have been on the ground. I don't remember outside the Garrett Wilson where he fumbled on that end around and he recovered it. I don't remember the Jets jumping on a loose ball and actually getting it. It's like very rare to see.
Weird.
So it's just another like small nitpicky negative with the defense that along with the tackling, it's like I wish they would just fully capitalize on all these opportunities because that is the meat that's left on the bone that Rob Saleh keeps
It
talking about.
it
That
really is though. I've always felt this way. The ball just bounces. It's such luck.
exactly.
How many times do you? I mean, you want to rip your hair out. You see, and it could be any team. It seems to always happen to the Jets though, but it's literally like one defender and the football, and like all he's got to do is pick it up, and he just bobbles it for a split second, and then there's 18 dudes there smashing into each other, and the
Yep.
ball's all over. And now it's almost like if you don't get it on that first scoop, like everyone's gonna get a hand on it before it gets.
Exactly. Yep.
It was somebody talking about this deal, and I've always felt this way. I always feel like, of course, you want to force turnovers, but fumbles and fumble recoveries, to me, of all the turnovers, they're just so random.
Oh,
Like
for
sometimes,
sure.
like you were saying the other day, even though they didn't pick up that fumble against the Patriots, if they had, like nobody even hit that guy, just running and dropped the ball.
Yeah.
And like
How
if the
did
Jets
DJ not get that?
had the Jets
Yeah.
pick that up, right, which they didn't, but if they had, are you gonna be like, oh, great job forcing a turnover? No, you happen to be
Right.
standing there when some
Right.
dude dropped it and you picked it up. Like it wasn't a great play.
It
Again,
was
it
a
was a bad
goof
play.
play.
You
Yeah.
didn't get it. But yet fumbles are just so random, and it's infuriating because it really does feel like every time the Jets, like when you're like, it all happens so quickly, but you have that brief second where you're like, this is ours. I see
Mhm.
4 Jets jerseys around the ball, no jerseys from the other team, and then all of a sudden it's doink doink doink, and then it's all over the place, and the refs are giving it to the other team. You're like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's truly amazing. I'm forgetting who said the quote, but they mentioned something along the lines of football is a game with an oblong ball that just does
Yes.
not bounce right. And at any
Yeah.
given moment, you think it's coming right to
Doesn't
you, and
bounce the same way
it'll
twice.
just go exactly. So it truly is a luck thing completely. It just seems like the Jets are always on the negative side of that, but we have been very I don't want to say lucky in other aspects of the season, but football gods in the terms of luck have been with the Jets way more than they haven't been. So I'll take interceptions over fumbles anyway. That's neither here nor there.
Yep.
Sauce Gardner leads the AFC in terms of cornerback Pro Bowl votes. He said he was humbled by it. I think it's not a surprise that he has this. Maybe it was a little bit of a surprise that he's the leader. I knew he would be up there. I maybe not the leader, but What are your thoughts? Obviously, he's been dominant, and he's number one in votes.
It's unbelievable, man. I mean,
Mhm.
look, Jets fans are we've seen from the Pepsi Rookie of the Week thing that
Mhm.
Jets fans will not be outdone on Twitter, which is kind of hilarious. I love it.
Amazing.
And as I said before, it's kind of a joke in that it's a fan voted on award, but the fact that Jets are being nominated every week is I'm happy with that. Like that, I'm
Yep.
I'm good. Somebody has recognized it. These rookies are playing well every single week, and that's good enough for me. That's a great reflection on this draft class, and I think Sauce being number one. I haven't watched the guy play. I watched him play in college. I can't remember if we've talked about him or not. Tariq Woolen. I know
Yeah.
obviously he's in the NFC. Statistically, it looks like they're on par in almost every category. Like they're neck and neck with
Mhm.
Woolen having more interceptions. But as far as like completion percentage and stuff like that, I think it's great that Sauce is one. Obviously, having the big market, great personality, great name. All that stuff helps. He's already got a brand. Like the guy had a brand before he was drafted, which is
Right.
insane. But it's well deserved. It's not like he's got a catchy name with an early round pick, and that's why he's getting these votes. He's getting these votes because he's shutting down. He's already at the point. I mean, how crazy is it? I think I made this point earlier in the season. Um, it only took a few games before like opposing fan bases were celebrating the fact that one of their guys got a catch on him. Like
Mhm.
you don't do that unless a guy is awesome because it's the NFL. Everyone's going to give up catches. Everyone's going to get catches, you know, unless you're Elijah Moore playing with Zach Wilson. But everyone's going to get catches. Everyone's going to give up catches, and that's what like you don't. It's not a big deal. But like when Diggs had that catch on Sauce against Buffalo, like all these Bills fans, oh look, we got Diggs won, Sauce nothing, like right away, and
It's
it's
the
like
first play.
this guy is in like his seventh NFL game against an all pro. And
Mhm.
like you guys are noticing and celebrating the fact that he got a catch on him. So, I mean, that quickly among other fan bases, whether they would admit it, like fans don't realize when they're doing that, they're showing an insane amount of respect to a guy. Um,
Yeah.
so whether they're admitting it or not, like the guy is getting attention, he's shutting people down. And this week, man, him and Justin Jefferson, like that's gonna be that because
Ye
Jefferson's amazing. He's amazing. So it's going to be interesting to see who he draws. Does Sauce follow him? I don't know, but it's.
Yeah, we
I mean,
could
they're going
jump.
to be at some point, but and it's going to be that's like that has the potential to be the sort of worth the price of admission matchup.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers from Chicago just yet. Um, but on the season, Sauce has allowed 208 yards in coverage. I don't think that number has changed significantly since the Bears game. I know the one or two plays that Claypool beat him on might have been like 30 yards. So even if it is
31, I
30
forget what
yards,
it
it's
was.
under 250 yards on the season for this guy, and we're over the halfway point of his rookie
That's
season. So it's
and
nuts.
he's and
He's
he's taking the best receiver, or usually,
most of the time, yeah,
yeah. Even if he's taking the second best receiver, if he's going
exactly.
400 yards on the year, I don't care if that's against opposing tight ends. Like that's amazing
Yeah, exactly. And
as a rookie.
yeah, and
There's so
obviously
many rookie corners playing well. It's almost
it
unexplainable
is
right now.
weird. Yeah. Well, it's past happy league. It's like eventually these guys are gonna break, but to be so good so fast, I think
That's what I mean. Who's
the
the
last
kid?
3 years have been
The kid
like
I really
good
liked,
rookie
Martin
classes.
Emerson out of Mississippi State. Like
Yeah,
I
for
heard him the other
Cleveland.
day.
Yep.
I liked him pre-draft. I hadn't heard his name all year, and then I heard someone just talk about his numbers the other day, and I was like, Jesus, he's doing it too. Tariq Woolen loved him at UTSA.
Mhm.
Um, Emerson I really liked, but the kid with the Dolphins, I don't even remember his name. I'm not going to pretend I knew who that guy was. I think he was undrafted. Don't they have an undrafted guy who's like playing lights out?
Oh, yeah, yeah, they do. I don't
Yeah,
even know his name, but
yeah, I
yes,
forget
they
his
do.
name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is weird. But yeah, so Sauce is deserving of Pro Bowl. He's obviously probably a lock at this point to make it based off the voting. I
I would
think there's
imagine.
others on defense willing or worthy of it too. Mosley, Quinn Williams. I think any of the DBs really. Maybe you could argue Lamarcus Joyner, no, but any DB really is deserving of it that starts for the Jets. And
Michael
then
Carter. Cornerback
Exactly.
Michael
Oh
Carter.
my goodness, he's so good. Somebody tweeted out
He's so
Michael Carter
underrated.
30, a greater sign Michael Carter 32, and I was like, I don't want to like take a shot at Michael Carter, the running back, but
No.
this tweet is absolutely true from a perspective of I think Michael Carter is so much better for the team at what he does is just so like it goes so under the radar because of what Sauce and
Dude,
DJ
I
do.
forget he's on the roster. You just don't hear his name. He's a guy
Exactly.
like when he's doing his job that well, you'll go like almost an entire game without hearing his name once because they just don't throw at him.
Yep, they put out the tweet 16th in PFF coverage grade,
I was
so
gonna say I think he was top 20.
and that's the
And that's the
lowest
thing.
of the
We
Jets
love the good
corners, so
PFF grades, but the bad ones are bullshit.
yeah, exactly, and you
I
gotta
mean I
take it
mean
with
bull
a
crap.
grain of salt, but when you go in and watch it, he's really locking down hard opponents, and Justin Jefferson does play in the slot a lot, so that's gonna be a tough one for him, and the last name I wanna throw out there before we fully get into the Vikings is Greg Zuerlein. He deserves a Pro Bowl vote. I know he missed the kick in the rain, and I know that hurt you a little bit more than it should have. But Greg Zuerlein absolutely deserves Pro Bowl, even All Pro for what he did. The 57-yarder was so impressive. It was good
That
from
was good from 70. I
65.
don't care what anybody
It's
says. That
70
was good from
exactly.
70.
It's so good. It was so high through the
In
uprights.
that
So
weather, that's impossible.
it's silly. And now we're in a dome, so maybe they'll give it to him from 70 yards just at the end of the half just to see if he
There
can
you
do
go.
it.
That'd be nice.
So we're going to fully transition now into the Vikings preview. You led it right there with Justin Jefferson. He is the number one player to watch. He was the NFC's Offensive Player of the Month for November. And this is the second November in a row that Justin Jefferson has won the award. Good thing for the Jets is they play him on December 4th and not in November anymore. So he's the player of the month in November, and he can fall off a little bit when he sees Sauce and Reed this week. No, that's obviously not realistic, and he's going to get his opportunities. And I think as long as you limit his opportunities, you have a very good shot in this one. The Vikings are 9-2, but all of 8 of their 9 wins, are of one score. Their losses do come by big margins, 17 plus points. They lost 24-7 to Philly in week 2, and then they lost 2 weeks ago 40-3 to Dallas. So they are susceptible to being blown out. And it seems like when they win, they are only winning by a very small margin. They beat all 3 teams in the AFC East. I believe it was like 3, 5, and 7 points for all 3 teams. So, but they have beaten all 3. They're looking for the sweep. One thing before I throw this question at you, Minnesota's defense, third most receptions of 20 plus yards allowed with 43. That's third most behind Pittsburgh and Atlanta with 45. So realistically, they're second because Atlanta and Pittsburgh are tied. So just hearing that stat alone, does that give you way more confidence that Mike White can do this in a dome after coming out of the rain where he threw for 315?
I wish I remember. I should have saved the tweet. I need to start saving tweets that I know I'm going to discuss during the show.
Mm-hmm.
But somebody tweeted
Bookmark.
out the amount of man coverage Minnesota plays. Like they don't
Yes.
play man coverage. They don't believe they're good enough to hang with opposing receiver. It's a lot of zone, a lot of deep coverage or cover 2, whatever, working in space and giving guys room to run. And when you have as many explosive receivers as the Jets do, that gives you a chance to make some plays. So I really, this is a game where I expect a lot of points to be scored, and hopefully the Jets defense holds up their end of the bargain and keeps it, keeps Minnesota at least in check. They're going to get their points. You're not going to hold Minnesota to 13, but if you can keep them, in check, and Mike White again just decisive with the ball, limit the turnovers. I don't see him having a lot of 0 turnover games with the way he plays the game. But that's fine as long as he, finds the end zone a few times.
Yeah, and to pull up that stat, I'm glad you reminded me because I bookmarked the tweet that you're referencing. Ben
Good
Fennell, who
work.
works for CBS and the NFL Network, he does a ton of film breakdown. He actually posted a couple clips of Michael Clemens earlier this week at @BenFennell_NFL
Yeah,
on
good
Twitter if you
game.
want to check those out. He said Vikings secondary/coverage tendencies are interesting. Zone coverage, free access, and open wide receivers all over the defense, allowing a ton of yards and explosive pass plays. They do not want to play man coverage. And he listed some ranks here. Cover 1, they're 31st in the league. Cover 0, 29th. Cover 2, 27th. And press coverage, they're 30th. So they truly are letting the wide receivers get off the line of scrimmage freely. And if that's the case this week, we saw what Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore can do And we've seen it all year on film. It's just a matter of them not getting the ball. But now that they were getting the ball, we saw exactly the fruits of their labor because Mike LaFleur is scheming these guys open. So if that's the case, I do think that Mike White can carve up this defense if they're going to play soft zone and let these guys eat. Yards after catch is the name of the game for Elijah Moore. Garrett Wilson, he had the yards after catch on the second touchdown. So we know he's explosive with the ball after the play. So get everybody involved in the pass game. The linebackers are going to sink 8 to 10 yards deep and just let the underneath stuff. So any running back underneath is going to work. I don't really have too much else about the Vikings other than, like I mentioned, it's a dome game, which is the first and only for the Jets, which I think is big because we've played a lot of outdoor weather games so far this year, and you can use that as an excuse or not. That's what happens when you play in the Northeast and the AFC East against
Yeah.
Buffalo, New England, New York.
Yep.
We know what it is. So the elements don't really affect us, but I think it's important to put out that there is a dome game on the schedule. After the rain game and seeing what the offense did, 466 total yards, I'm not really worried that the elements would be a factor anyway. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the Jets win this one pretty handedly. I'll give a prediction. I'm going to say 28-10 again. I feel like it's going to be, it could be a little bit high scoring because the Vikings offense is susceptible to scoring a ton of points. Justin Jefferson, Thielen, Cook, Hawkinson, they have the guys, but if you could get after Kirk Cousins, I know it's not a primetime game, but Kirk Cousins is susceptible to throwing turnover worthy plays. He has 17 on the season, according to PFF, and that's of all different pressure types. It doesn't matter if he's clean or not. So he's willing to throw the ball up there and, hope Justin Jefferson's, on the other side of it. And sometimes that's not going to be the case. So I'm going to say 28-10. I know it's a little bold, but I feel a lot more confident after watching Mike White in a full game. And I don't think that he's going to regress like he did last year in 2020.
I'll tell you what, man, if they hold the Vikings to 10 points, like I've already put a few bucks on them winning the Super Bowl. They hold the Vikings to 10.
Oh man.
And Mike White carves them up. Listen, this defense is good, but Minnesota, I'm thinking I'm right on board with you with the Jets points. I was going to say 28-24 Jets.
Okay.
28-10 would be a dream. And we'll see. I will say though, where the Jets do have a chance. To be honest, I haven't watched any Minnesota, but I looked up some of their numbers. Or not. I haven't watched any of them this week.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like they really struggle up the middle. I think their guards have given up like over 60 pressures and hits and stuff like that. So I think, a matter of fact, I pulled it up a second ago. And again, see, these are the things where I think PFF is useful. Like I don't love their grades.
The premium stats are where it's at.
So Ed Ingram and Ezra Cleveland, this is PFF, have given up a combined 78 pressures.
Wow.
And if you throw in Garrett Bradbury, he's given up 22. So that's 100. That's a clean 100 on the interior.
Just the interior, yeah. And they could be down Christian Darrisaw. So
I saw that.
It's not confirmed.
Out, then you have to shut them down.
Exactly.
You can't.
You got to be back up in the 5-6 sack game again. Absolutely.
Exactly. So that's where the Jets do have the ability. Like if Quinnen Williams is on and Sheldon Rankins plays as we expect them to, I think they have a chance to, to absolutely shut these guys down. But like I like the Jets to win either way. I like Minnesota to put up points. But if the Jets do get, sort of the number you're talking about, hold them to 10, I think it's going to be the Jets just abusing them up the middle.
Yeah, I think 28-24 is definitely a more realistic outcome based on the way the Vikings are playing. But I don't know. I'm just going to go out on that limb and say that they do, because if this is the game, I feel like obviously, this is a tough road stretch, 2 games in a row, Minnesota and Buffalo. So it's really going to be, I've said this at least 13 times on this show, and we're only in episode 13, but this is going to be the toughest stretch for the Jets. Like Minnesota, Buffalo on the road.
Detroit's no joke right now.
Exactly. And you're going to have your backup in Mike White. Obviously, your backup running back situation.
Yeah, I mean, your backup is better than your starter. Like a lot better.
That's a loose term backup. Exactly. Yeah. But exactly. That's exactly. It's a tough stretch no matter how you slice it. And I think making another statement win would be just absolutely huge. So 28-10, I'm going out on the limb. We can dive into some draft prospects to end out. I know we only have 5 minutes, so I was just going to throw out some playoff scenarios that help the Jets, as well as one player. Um, Obviously, tonight, the Buffalo Bills play the New England Patriots. We need the Bills to beat the Patriots. I know a lot of fans are trying to root the opposite so that the Jets can win the AFC East. There's still a chance that the Jets can win the AFC East, but we don't have the tiebreaker with New England. So until it's decided with Buffalo and whether we split or we take both, we need New England to have less wins than the Jets. Buffalo is not our main concern right now. It's New England. So Buffalo, we need to beat New England tonight. Which will start about in an hour. We need San Francisco, obviously, to beat Miami, but that's no surprise there. We need Kansas City to beat Cincinnati because we do not have the tiebreaker against Cincinnati. They obviously beat us 27-12 in week 3, so that's a tiebreaker we do not own. They do have a hard strength of schedule down the stretch, so Cincinnati is in a bit of a gauntlet right now, and they can't afford any losses. So we need Kansas City to start, help us out there. Some pipe dream ones, I believe Denver, if they beat Baltimore. I just saw that they're playing Baltimore. That's not going to happen. And Denver to beat Los Angeles Chargers, which I don't even know. I feel like the Jets are ahead of the Chargers on the standing, so it doesn't really, help us. Obviously, it will help us, but the Raiders and the Chargers, not really. It's a moot point. It doesn't matter really because the Jets are ahead of them, control their own destiny. Any of those games, ring a bell to you and that you want to touch on?
Yeah, I mean, I think Cincinnati, like they pulled one out last week. I thought they were going to have a tough time,
Yeah,
against Tennessee. Derrick Henry at full strength. I thought Tennessee would win in a close one. They obviously pulled it out. Kansas City right now, Patrick Mahomes being Patrick Mahomes, I think if you need help from Kansas City, you're in good shape because they're not going to lose a lot of football games. So that's going to be interesting. Tonight's game, yeah, we want Buffalo. It's going to be, and listen, obviously, normally I don't care if Buffalo gets beat. But if I need Buffalo to win, excuse me, if the Jets need Buffalo to win, and they're playing New England, as someone commented here in the comment section, the Bills are going to beat the brakes off New England. Hope they do. Hope they beat them by 70. Like demoralize them, crush them. I have no interest in seeing the Patriots do well. If it was the other way around, I'd want. Well, no, I wouldn't want the Pats to pound anyone, but yeah, I mean, it's go for it, and I'll be rooting for the Bills tonight, and I think they'll win. They're a much better team than New England. We saw what they did to them in the playoffs last year. So yeah, I like Buffalo tonight, and luckily that's who we need. So
yeah, it's the rare moment when you're conflicted on who to root for, but I'm glad that it is this way and I'm not having to root for New England because it just hurts me so much to root for New England in any facet, even when it helps the Jets. Like I'd rather the Jets just have taken care of their own business so I don't have to root for New England at any point in the season. But before we get out of here, do you have any draft prospects that you wanted to bring up this week? I know the college football season wrapped up. We have a couple bowl games, a lot of declarees for the draft already. Senior Bowl invites coming in out the wazoo. Trying to keep up with them has been very hectic throughout the week. So any guys you want to mention here at the end?
Just one, and I hope I didn't mention him earlier in the year because I may have now that I think about it, but only because last night I watched 2 or 3 games last night. I had to rewatch Liberty, Arkansas because I screwed up all the clips I pulled. But I watched Boston College, NC State, and Zay Flowers, man. He's not a big guy. He's like 5'8", 5'9", but I remember watching him last year, loved him. And in that game, he had like 7 catches for 130 and a couple of touchdowns. And it just reminded me, like, God, I really, really like this guy's game. Looking forward, excuse me, got a couple computers running. I'll probably have New England Buffalo on one game and have some college games on another laptop. And that's kind of the point I'm at, Dylan. I don't watch a lot of live college football because I need to be able to rewind, find plays that stand out and record them and label them and file them. So I have live games on in the background while I'm focusing more on the games from earlier in the week or maybe even early, maybe the day before if people get them. I need you YouTube people to get every game put on YouTube. I'm tired of not being able to find. I can't get a damn Oregon game. I can't. USC is hard to find. I was saying Washington is always hard to find. People on the West Coast need to wake up and get your act together and post me some full games.
Yeah, Matthew loves ball. Get on
Matt
this.
loves ball. Love that
Pac-12.
guy. I got to get that dude's address and send him a thank you card.
Seriously, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
from
get
JetNation.
some more
We love
Pac-12
you,
in
and we're
there.
glad you love ball because
Yeah, exactly. Um, you threw me off there. My guy that you did mention Zay Flowers, by the way. Week
I
5, I
thought
have
I
it in my
did.
notes.
Stupid thing.
You brushed over him. It wasn't like a deep anything like that. So just another name to throw out there. But he did take a Shrine Bowl invite, and he did officially declare for the NFL draft, I believe, as of the
Yeah.
last 48 hours.
Yeah,
So
I think in the last 24, actually.
yeah,
It was
maybe
funny
even
because I just
closer.
watched him, and then I saw I forget his name. I'm an idiot. The Jets beat writer for the Daily News. Um, he tweeted out that Zay Flowers had declared, and I said, "Oh wow, I just watched him last night, and watched him a lot last year because I watched a lot of Boston College O line last year, and as a result, a lot of Zay Flowers."
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So Zay Flowers definitely one that I like. I've definitely had my eye on him for a while. I'm excited to see what he does at the All-Star game. The guy that I brought, I only have one prospect to bring to the table. This is the guy I studied over the summer. Kind of fell off in following up on him, and I kind of did with just his stats. I want to go back and see his season as a whole now, but he's still playing technically, and that's Georgia defensive back Christopher Smith. I believe he's a safety, but they kind of play him in a hybrid nickel role, sort of. So it's kind of like a cornerback slash safety for him. 5'10", 5'11", 190. He's a fifth-year player with 40 career games. He's played all 12 games for the Bulldogs this year. He has 47 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 1 sack, 2 interceptions, 5 passes defensed, and a forced fumble. So he kind of does a little bit of everything. My notes on him was he just had the instincts of a veteran player, like I mentioned, a 5-year player. He just kind of led the back end of the defense, and I know they had some younger pieces. Keely Ringo's another star in that back secondary for them, but Christopher
Yeah,
Smith just kind of kept everything together, and he was always the one making the play. I don't really have a comp for him at this point, and I'm not really big on comps, but just his presence and his, I don't know, his communication, everything, like he's pointing, calling out plays. And this was all off last year's film when I watched him in the summertime. So I was really excited to see that he had, filled up the stats, and I'm excited to dive back into him. But Christopher Smith is somebody that's actually being talked about as a top 50 to top 75 player, almost a lock at this point. So he's probably higher than I even thought he was going to be when I watched him in the summertime. So excited for him. Obviously, he's still playing the college football playoffs. Georgia, I believe they're number 1, so they're gonna face. It looks like USC at this point. I know things can change, but
yeah.
Georgia USC is going to be a pretty big matchup. They have explosive offense on USC versus Georgia's stout defense. That's going to be a big matchup, and that's my guy. You
Yeah,
have any?
since I screwed up and gave us Flowers a second time,
Sure.
let me go with another guy who I actually tweeted about earlier in the week. Another guy I loved last year.
Mm-hmm.
Watched him a little bit this week, and I'm gonna try the video share, see if this works. Jack Campbell, linebacker from Iowa.
Okay.
He's a guy who covers a ton of
I had
ground.
him written down. That's funny.
Yeah, and he's so what do I do? Do I hit picture in picture? I don't know how
Let
to
me
do
see.
this.
I can add it here.
Do you have it? Yeah, there you go.
There we go.
Guy, I mean, seeks out the ball carrier, gets a million tackles.
Yep, number
Um,
31 there.
yeah, number 31 had a really impressive INT last week, or I forget who it was against. Oh, against Ohio State.
Yep.
Just sort of leaping up over the middle, outstretched hand, got a hand on the ball and pulled it in for the pick. His PFF grade looked really good in terms of his coverage, and I did think his coverage looked better this year. So I think that he's a guy. Here he is again, middle of the defense, right in the middle against this is Kentucky last year.
Oh yeah.
Finds ways, gets through the trash, big time hitter, short tackler, and a guy that. One thing I have a hard time with Dylan, admittedly, is like mocking where guys are going to go because
Yep.
I get this bias where I watch a guy so much I probably overvalue them a little, and I might say a guy is a top 100 pick and he ends up going like 170th or something,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just I watched so much of that guy. I liked him. Like I watched Jack Campbell, and I'm like, I can see him being a second rounder. And I pulled up one or two lists, and he was sort of ranked in like the 90s. And I'm like, all right, maybe I'm crazy. But listen, as they say, every board's different, and what one team has as a second round guy might be a fifth rounder for another team. So But yeah, Jack Campbell is a really good player, and I'm glad I realized that I can just pull the videos up.
Yeah,
It
that was awesome.
might make
That
might make it
the
a little bit easier in the future instead of having
Exactly,
to
the
see me
efficiency
about
of
it.
that
But
was very
yeah,
smooth. Nobody can see it on the back end, but that was very
yeah,
smooth how that worked there. And I
that worked
believe that
well.
was Chris Rodriguez, the running back for
Yes,
Kentucky,
yes,
and he's
Kentucky.
another draft eligible name. So
He's having a really nice year.
yeah, exactly. So Jack
He's
Campbell,
another guy. Last year, I was watching so much Wandale Robinson.
yep.
This is what happens. You're watching for one guy, but then I'm like,
Next
man,
year
this
you go back and you're like, oh,
running
there's
back's
another
really
guy.
good too.
Yep.
Yeah, like I said, Will Levis. I was asleep at the wheel on him last year. I
Yeah.
was probably 5 games into watching Wandale Robinson before I realized like these are really good throws that he's hauling in. Like that, it's not all him. And I'm like, I got to start looking at this quarterback. So yeah, it's a fun process.
Yeah, it's definitely fun. And you mentioned it before. Not every team is going to watch every single player. So somebody
No,
could be 50, 60, 70 on your board, but they could be 140 on another board. And that's on a team to team basis. I believe Rex Hogan has come out in interviews and said that the Jets really have like a board of 150 to 200 guys that are like their scheme. That's it. Like if they're
perfect
not that
fit. Yep.
scheme or whatever, they're not even looking at the guy. So 150 is a very small number, and the Patriots go even smaller than that with like 120, 115 sometimes. So draft
Which
boards for
seems
teams
unfair
are
because I'm having to go off of PFN's list and I'm looking at 1,500 players trying to get an
exactly, and
idea about each guy.
the draft
Jets
pool
could just
gets
kindly, I
larger.
promise not to tell anyone, just show me your list and I'll know who to watch.
Right,
Save me
exactly.
thousands of
And
hours.
yeah, and I think that's the hardest part is identifying scheme, because just because they don't play that scheme in college doesn't mean that they can't fit that scheme in the
Yeah, it
NFL.
doesn't mean the Jets aren't looking at him going, we can make it. We can make that
Exactly.
work.
So you almost have to watch 1,400 players
Everyone.
and figure out, okay, project the scheme or look at the scheme they're in, and will that help them in the NFL at the Jets
Yep.
specifically? So it's a fun process, and we're just scratching the surface. I
Hmm.
can talk, scratching the surface on the draft here, and we flirted with it before, but I think we will make it official eventually that we're just gonna do a second show with strictly draft
Draft
stuff, and
only.
especially if the Jets keep going with this playoff run, because I go to Senior Bowl first week of February, and at this point, the Jets could be playing in the game the weekend before I fly out to Mobile. So it's I'm not, that's putting the cart before the horse and getting really excited. But if the Jets
Yeah,
make the playoffs, that's certainly a possibility. And it's getting harder obviously to maintain with the Jets and keep with the draft, but it's such a fun process that, even
it is.
watching 2
It is.
hours a week of draft prospects is just it's a fun break from the Jets. And like I said, scratching the surface, we're just getting into it. I think we're now up to 90 names on the list. So we're going to get to 100 before Christmas for sure.
Easily, easily.
Any final thoughts on the game, any prospects or anything like that before we get out of here?
No, no, that can wrap it up for us, man. We got a lot of prospects to watch, but there's hopefully some playoff football in the Jets' future.
Hell yeah, I think that takes precedent over everything, but you know us, we're gonna be crazy and cover it all no matter what the circumstances are. Um,
Absolutely.
9-2 Vikings, 7-4 Jets. Jets are only 3-point underdogs, which says a lot compared to the fact that they're on the road with a backup quarterback.
That's a pick 'em.
That's what I'm saying. Neutral field. I feel like that's a very tough choice, and probably a half-point spread at Vegas. So it's about as tight as it gets, and we'll leave it at that. Jets have opportunities to win, get to 8-4, and really control their destiny down the stretch. So for Glenn Naughton, you can follow him on Twitter at AceFan23. Also follow his draft Twitter at JetsPicks at JETSPICKS. You can follow me on Twitter at D Tereman. Follow us at JetNation on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, everything. Like, comment, subscribe, leave any reviews that you have, anything you want us to talk about. We're very, we're very easy with the criticisms. We'll take it. We'll talk about any topics you guys want. We appreciate all the feedback in the chat. Everybody's hyped up about this Bills Patriots game. So go Buffalo. But most importantly, let's go Jets.